Well, okay, I'm going to get us started. In the late 90s, 1999, a very good year for movies.
Oh, great year.
Cruel Intentions.
Okay.
Here's the back of the box. Two vicious step-siblings of an elite Manhattan prep school make a wager to deflower the new headmaster's daughter before the start of term. Tagline, in the game of seduction, there is only one rule. Never fall in love.
Ooh.
This is based on the French book, Dangerous Liaisons, basically.
Right.
It's been adapted many times. Sarah Michelle Gellar and, is it Ryan Philippe or Felipe?
I have always said Felipe. And then
I've always said Felipe.
I have people correct me, and it's like Philippe. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't.
I don't know. He's not here. I'm going to say Felipe.
Yeah.
They're step-siblings of considerable wealth who make a bet over whether Ryan P. can take Reese Witherspoon's virginity before the school year starts.
And she's proud of her virginity.
She's
written an article
she's like
about
an
it.
advocate
Yeah,
for it, or
right.
at least like waiting until you're like truly in love.
Yeah.
Which she didn't. It's not like a marriage thing either. She's just like, you got to be in love.
It's not a Jesus thing.
Yeah, which is weird because she has a boyfriend apparently, which we never see. So
Yeah.
which means she's saying outright, we don't love each other.
Right. Or it's like one of those like Canadian boyfriend type of things where it's like, does he really exist? Because he's going he's like hiking through Europe or something.
Yeah,
like,
that's true. But she seems like a prominent type person, or this could be a Manti Te'o situation, I guess. But I think the fact that this movie came out in 1999 is important in the way that it depicts opulence.
Yeah.
By the end of the 90s, we weren't even really like questioning opulence anymore.
No.
We had kind of been on a trajectory as a country and a culture where we kind of like succeeded in fooling ourselves that like the world of like wealth and privilege was coming for all of us.
Yes.
It was kind of our birthright as Americans. Mm-hmm. The year 2000, a year after this movie, that's when MTV Cribs came out.
Really?
Which I think was kind of like a big turning point that no one really talks about anymore.
No, yeah.
I think it was kind of a defining like post 9/11 cultural document. I mean, it was before 9/11, but like it endured for like the entire decade.
Oh yeah.
And I was kind of aged out of MTV or was aging out of MTV at that point. But that was just one of those things that just kind of lingered over everything, whenever you saw it, like, especially that was when like big McMansions started to pop up.
Yeah.
And so, the 90s was just kind of like that. And the 2000s was like what happened after that. Everyone's like, we kind of accept, like, we all just got to get big houses and stuff. And so, and then we had a financial crisis.
Yep.
But still, like in the 90s, the opulence that Sarah Michelle Gellar and Ryan Felipe are in is it would be considered grotesque.
Yes.
Now. Like in a movie nowadays, if you made it today, you would be like, look at these terrible, horrible people.
Right. Not something you aspire to, but something you just fucking
it's completely aspirational in 1999, but now we look at it, you're like, oh, these gross people living this gross lifestyle.
Yeah. Fuck them.
Yeah. And so they have this sort of opulence that completely separates them from society, from like the normal rules and reality.
Yeah.
They're completely insulated from the outside world. And they have this like complete disconnect of the behavior that's expected of them in private and in public. And there's not really there's no like humor in that necessarily. They just kind of like, this is how these people act, when you're this rich, you act this way in public, you act this way in private, and that's just the rules. And I had never really noticed before in this movie, but there really is no connection or contact with the outside world at all.
Oh no!
Until the very end of the movie, when someone gets hit by a car, and it literally kills them because it's like, oh my god, the outside world is like piercing this world of wealth.
Yeah.
The way this movie plays now, it almost comes off as like camp humor.
Cool. Yeah, it definitely hits different. And 2023.
It's very self-aware about how filthy it is.
Yeah.
It's very self-aware. It's very self-aware about how reprehensible these characters are, but like it seems to be like totally blind as to like the wealth that it's depicting.
I agree.
It doesn't even expect us to be impressed by it.
Right, yeah. That's true. I don't know if it's self-aware enough about how detestable these characters are, but we can get into that.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, it's probably not quite self-aware, but like it gets it a little bit.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like the actors like are clearly trying to be like douchebags.
Oh, yeah.
I actually thought of the movie Brick when I was watching this.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because it's like it's a very adult world that they find themselves in.
Oh, yeah.
They act very adult, yet they're like completely actualized within it. Mm-hmm. And Brick was a teenagers in a noir.
Yeah.
But this is sort of a teenagers in a Lifetime original movie.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And it's like a really horny movie. I don't know if it's like, I wouldn't call it a sexy movie.
No.
I don't know if that's because the characters are teenagers or it's just because like, I don't know. I think maybe that was kind of like the vibe of the late 90s. I'm not really sure.
It definitely was a vibe of the 90s, and yeah, we kept getting hornier as the 90s unfolded, I think. But yeah, I don't think it's sexy.
Yeah, there's something about it that just really is not. It should be.
Right. Because there's a scene where Sarah Michelle Gellar's character and Selma Blair's character kiss, and I remember that being like the talk of this. Like everybody was like, "You got to go see it because they
Well,
kiss."
speaking of MTV, I believe it won Best Kiss.
I think it did.
But yeah, that was a big deal. Like we were supposed to care about that.
And again, it was not a sexy kiss. I mean, like it's supposed to be, but it's not.
It's not. Yeah. But the main reason I'm putting this on the shelf, first and foremost, is like it's just so goddamn trashy, and I kind of love it for how trashy it is, and maybe that's the opulent side of me that's saying that.
Yeah.
The opulence of this movie is part of the trashiness that I love. The cars, the massive multi-million-dollar New York apartments, the fancy clothes, the fancy properties in the Hamptons, the young, beautiful people. It's trashy to like that stuff in a movie, but we like that stuff in a movie sometimes.
We do. I have two questions for you about this movie, and I'll start with the non-spoilery one first because the second question definitely gives things away. But I was struck upon rewatching this by how present the soundtrack is. It feels like it's trying to turn scenes from this movie into a music video for the songs that are playing, and the songs. Yeah. Like we get large sections of songs, and I remember, it reminded me that this soundtrack was quite popular at the time.
It really was. It only really had a couple of hits, I think.
Right.
I think this was the age of the soundtrack that was engineered.
Yes.
Where it's like this studio is making a movie. They also own this record label. Yep. Who are the bands that are about to pop? And they would pick like the 10 songs that they wanted to make hits, and like some of them hit, some of them didn't.
Right.
What is it? Bittersweet Symphony is in this.
Yes.
And right at the end, and it's kind of a cool moment. It's a ridiculous scene.
It is. It's insane.
It's a completely ridiculous scene.
Yeah.
So
I mean, did it work for you the way that music was integrated? Because I kept asking myself every time a song came on, I was like, wow, this is really just being like, I feel like I'm being force fed this music, and it doesn't. In many cases, it didn't integrate well with what was happening on screen, but I guess they were trying.
It integrated in the sense that it were on the level of trash that it is. Right. It rang true. I'll say.
Yeah, it's handled completely different than movies like Judgment Night, which we've talked about, where a lot of that soundtrack is being played on the stereos of cars and like in scenes or like in the back, like it's incorporated into the movie. And this is literally just like we're slapping it on top.
Yeah. Well, again, late 90s teen movie.
For sure. For sure.
I mean, Praise You is in this movie. The Fat Boy Slim song.
It is. Yes. So here's my other question. And this does deal in how the movie ends. So, if you want to avoid this, feel free to tune out. But when Ryan's character dies, I found myself thinking to myself, thank fucking God, this guy sucks.
Yeah,
and I didn't. I know you're supposed to feel like, oh, wow, that sucks. He's dead. He had this like. It could have worked out with him and Reese Witherspoon, but like the things that he does prior to falling in love with her are awful. Like,
right,
I mean, the movie opens with him essentially like releasing revenge porn onto the web of his therapist's daughter before revenge porn was even a term.
He invented revenge porn.
He invented revenge porn. The way he treats Selma Blair's character while he's, taking advantage of her, right. And it's awful.
Yeah.
And then that's setting aside everything that, the bet to, take Reese Witherspoon's virginity. But, he sucked.
Yeah. And then they try, and there's no redemption really.
No.
He I guess the redemption is he fell in love with a virgin.
Right.
But they're not in love.
No.
They're just not supposed to be together. And this is the first time Ryan Felipe's ever felt anything. And she's like, well, he's kind of forbidden fruit. Whatever. It's just it's ridiculous.
And falling in love with a person does not redeem you for all of this fucking terrible
He's
behavior.
Not good to her necessarily. He's just not terrible.
Yeah, exactly.
And then at the end when his journal gets released is meant to be this well, first of all, it's a fuck you to Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Yeah.
But it's also they act like the other people in that book are not being victimized by its release.
Oh, right. And they are.
And they're the ones that put it out.
Yes.
Or some of them were. It's completely ridiculous. So it makes sense in this movie because that's the kind of ending you expect in a Lifetime original movie.
Yeah. So. Mean Girls did it better when it comes to releasing journals.
Yeah.
But none of this is to say it wasn't a fun rewatch, and I had a good time.
It is a blast to watch. It is a trash classic. It's a great look at late 90s, 2000s style opulence. And I'm putting it on the staff recommendation shelf this week.
Well, I'm glad you did. I enjoyed going back to it. I'm curious, have you seen either of the two sequels?
No.
I don't blame you. I haven't either. But they exist.
They're on the shelf, never been rented.
Oh, wow. Good for our customers.
Yes, they have good taste.
They do. I am going to take us to 2004 with the movie Spanglish. So, back of the box. Mexican immigrant and single mother Flor Moreno finds housekeeping work with Deborah and John Klasky, a well-off couple with 2 children of their own. When Flor admits that she can't handle the schedule because of her daughter Christina, Deborah decides that they should move into the Klasky home. Cultures clash, tensions run high as Flor and the Klaskys struggle to share space while raising their children on their own and very different terms. Tagline, every family has a hero, which I'm like, what? Well, how is that the fucking tagline?
That's terrible.
It's a horrible tagline.
I love bringing up the taglines though, because sometimes some of them are just so bad.
Good. Some of them are good. Some of them are
great.
Bad. Yeah.
Some of them are bad. That's why I love them.
Yes. So this is not the type of movie that I typically recommend.
No one gets eaten.
No one gets eaten. Everybody's safe at the end of this, relatively.
It's not. It's not abrasive to watch this movie.
No, it's
depending on how you feel about Adam Sandler.
I would say it's 180 degrees different than The Cook, the Thief, the Wife, and Her Lover, whatever the title of that was.
Well, there's a cook, a wife, almost a lover.
Almost a lover. No thieves. But
although, I feel like that one of those little kids was stealing something.
Something, yeah, probably. So this is different than what I normally bring to the shelf. But for some reason, I really enjoy this movie. We've talked a lot about the value of 3-star movies on this podcast.
Yes.
And I feel like Spanglish is exactly one of those movies. In fact, Adam Sandler's character, who plays a chef in this movie, talks about the ideal star rating for his restaurant at a certain point in this film. And I feel like what he says parallels how I feel about this film. So here's his quote. You know what you want? 3.25 stars. It would mean you're good, but not good enough to feel disappointed that you just missed out on excellence. You still get enough respect. You're right below the radar.
Yeah. But that's on a 4-star.
That's a 4-star.
4-star system.
That's a 4-star system. We're obviously talking about a 5-star system.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, 3 stars is exactly right for Spanglish.
Yes.
In my opinion. I feel like I appreciate a lot of individual facets of this movie more than the film as a whole. A few quick details. This was directed by James Brooks, who I was surprised. He's got some decent movies to his name. He directed As Good as It Gets, Broadcast News, Terms of Endearment. He hasn't directed a lot of movies. I think
he had his hands in The Simpsons.
Oh, did he?
Executive producer or something.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow, good for him. So this stars Adam Sandler, Téa Leoni, Cloris Leachman, and Paz Vega. Most of the actors are good in this. I particularly love Paz Vega and Cloris Leachman. Paz Vega is a character in this who doesn't speak English for a vast majority of the film. She does some fantastic physical acting.
Yeah.
She wears her emotions on her face. She's wonderful. Cloris Leachman,
she's the highlight.
She's fucking hilarious.
She's great.
She is so good in this. And I'll admit, she plays a bit of a caricature, but she's just so funny.
I think that person exists. I mean, she's a bit of a character, but like, yeah, I think that person totally exists.
I hope so, because I would love to spend all of my days with Cloris Leachman's character in this movie.
I don't know if I want her to be my mom.
No. No, but I'd hang out with her. I'd drink with her all day.
It'd be cool if she was like my neighbor.
Yeah, 100%. Téa Leoni is also good in this. She's really dislikable. Her character, you're not supposed to like her. And in fact, I think you're supposed to hate her, and it's very easy to do that. But that's the way she's written, and she plays it well. She's exactly right.
I don't know that she can play, not that, but it's fitting for this role.
The one actor who I think is out of place in this is Adam Sandler. He can do drama. He's phenomenal in Uncut Gems. I don't think he really fits here. Brings the movie down a little bit for me. I don't necessarily know who I would recommend as a better fit, but I think there's a lot of people who would be a better fit for his character here. It's just odd at some certain points.
I wish there was more scenes of him cooking.
I agree.
This seems like one of those movies where it's like he decided to go to like chef school for 3 months or whatever and learn how to learn knife skills and whatever. And I was like waiting for the 5-minute scene of Adam Sandler preparing a meal, and you don't really get that.
You don't get that, but there are two. I'm glad you brought this up because it dovetails nicely into why I chose this and the two scenes where food does play a pretty prominent role. So I don't know that I would have ever seen this if not for a good friend of mine who recommended it based on one particular scene in the movie. And it's a scene where Adam Sandler is making himself a sandwich. It happens in the middle of the movie. And this is it's a fucking perfect sandwich. He makes this thing and he's not even paying a whole lot of attention to what he's doing, but like you see it come together and you're like, I fucking want that sandwich. It looks so fucking good.
I mean, yeah, he's a high-end chef making a bacon, egg, and cheese at home.
Yeah, with like an egg on top.
I can't imagine anything better than that.
No. And he makes this sandwich and he cuts it. And he gets interrupted literally as he's holding it up to his face to take a bite. And what unfolds is like this long conversation between him and Paz Vega's character, and all you can think about is like, eat that fucking sandwich. Like I'm not even.
Can't we talk about this in 3 minutes?
Yeah, just let me take a bite.
Don't you work for me?
Right, because you see that the yolk of that egg just drip out, and
you can't let that sit there.
No, you can't.
That's not how egg yolks work.
No, and oh my god, it's just such a it's such a perfect sandwich, and it's so difficult to watch him have this conversation while it's just sitting there waiting for him. But there's another scene at the end of the film where Sandler makes a meal for Paz Vega's character, and it's made with a lot of love and care, and even the fact that the idea that he even wants to make this meal for her shows the role that food plays in this character's life. His life has just been turned upside down based on some things that unfold in the movie. He needs relief. He needs to be in a place where he belongs, and so he goes to the kitchen of the restaurant and he makes this great meal, and it's clear that food is the thing that he excels at.
What did he make?
Looked like ribs or like short ribs and asparagus.
It looked like it was like probably delicious, but also I was like, I'm not really sure what that is. I didn't really see what he did.
No, but yeah, he's definitely in his happy place when he's making it. And it's there's this stereotype that men who can cook are even more attractive when they can do that. And
I agree.
Paz Vega's character is definitely falling in love with this man as she's seeing him make this meal more so than she already was. But it's fun to watch. And those, like I said, food doesn't play a big role in the scenes of this film. Yes, he's a chef. Yes, he works at a restaurant. But those are the only two instances where we actually get some delicious food on screen. A couple other things that I appreciate. There won't be another occasion where we get an Adam Sandler film with a Hans Zimmer score, but it happens here.
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, that's Hans Zimmer composing the music. The score is definitely better than the movie. This is funny. It's funny in the same way that As Good as It Gets is. It's not so much laugh out loud, but smartly written. Cloris Leachman, again, really, really funny.
She's very funny.
Yeah. I also enjoy that this isn't your typical romantic comedy. It doesn't really have a happy ending as it relates to the romantic element. I like that the man isn't the main villain here. I like the role of culture in this movie.
Yeah.
All of that said, it does have some sappy elements.
It's very sappy.
Yeah.
I got a couple problems with this movie. Number one, he's a chef.
Yeah.
He was just referred to as the best chef in the country by, was it the Los Angeles Times? I don't know if they really made it clear. He's never at work. Like that is not how chefs operate. And I know they tried to explain away by saying oh yeah, he had to give away part of his restaurant to keep his buddy, the sous chef, to be and just okay, yes, but also he's there all the time.
Yeah,
that's not how, you don't have a chef that works part-time and a sous chef that works full-time.
You don't have a family life like Sandler's character has, and you're also the best chef in America.
No, by that point you've moved on to now you're a restaurateur or whatever. You're a chef that you might it's a different.
Yeah, you're opening your restaurant in a Vegas casino.
Right. Yeah. You're even if you're not working at the restaurant all the time, you're busy expanding and your brand or whatever the fuck you're doing. You're not at home babysitting your kids.
Right. Right.
That's my number one problem. Number two. Now keep in mind this is a 3-star movie. It's fine.
Yeah.
But I think there should be congressional hearings on why this movie is 130 minutes long.
Is it that long?
It's 130 minutes long.
That's too long.
It should be 90, 95.
Yeah.
Yes. I am astounded that this movie is 2 hours and 10 minutes.
It could be tighter. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of storylines here. There's there's the restaurant element. There's the dynamic between Adam Sandler and his wife, and she's having an affair in this movie. There's also Paz Vega's character and her daughter, and the things they're going. There's just a lot of
5-minute segment where they'd explain why he's never at work.
This movie's juggling a lot of balls, and it's longer than it needs to be. So
they need some editing. I think it would have been a lot more fun if it was a 95-minute movie.
I agree.
I think it would have been. I mean, like I say, again, 2 hours and whatever. It's what?
Yeah, come on. I also don't like the fact that they tell this story through the lens of the daughter who's kind of narrating, and she's telling this story as a college admissions essay. I don't know. I don't know that we need the daughter's perspective as our narrative anchor.
It didn't work. It wasn't necessary.
Yeah, it can just be a story about
the
families.
Voiceover. I can't. Man, voiceover is it's so hard to make it work, to make it not terrible, and they didn't do it here.
Yes, and so to be clear, I there are some parts of this movie that don't work, and I wasn't looking to. I'm not suggesting that people watch this just because it has That's Delicious element. I do think that those scenes are pretty great. But yeah, I think this is if you have 130 minutes, it's a fun. There's some things to appreciate about this.
I gotta say, I didn't mind Adam Sandler in this.
Did you? Or you didn't?
Yeah, I think he's fun.
Good. Well, this averages a 2.8 on Letterboxd, which I think is a hair low, just a hair. Critics did not love this, but to tie it back to our theme, here's a review by a Letterboxd user named Nadine Smith that I really liked. She gave the film 4 stars, and her review said, "The sandwich That's their entire
Yeah,
review.
it's a good it's a good looking sandwich.
It's a good looking sandwich, yeah.
I gotta say.
So yeah, Spanglish is going on the show.
I'm choosing Hard Target, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme.
The one and only.
From 1993. Anyway, here's the back of the box to Hard Target. When a woman's father goes missing, she enlists a local to aid in her search. The pair soon discover that her father has died at the hands of a wealthy sportsman who hunts homeless men as a form of recreation. Tagline: don't hunt what you can't kill. This is an adaptation. Yeah, this is an adaptation of The Most Dangerous Game.
Right.
Apparently, I don't know. It seems like they just took the idea of hunting people and said, it's an adaptation.
Right.
I don't know what they took from from that. But it's about a human hunting operation in and around New Orleans. Trivia: Sam Raimi was on set of this movie. He was an executive producer and kind of the backup director because they didn't really know what was going to happen with John Woo.
Right. I would have liked to have seen the Sam Raimi version of this movie. Not that the John Woo one is bad.
No. I'm not sure that Sam Raimi was interested in making that movie. I think he was just there in case something went wrong. And his bosses were like, just do this, all right? Kurt Russell was the first choice to play this part.
Ooh, I think they ended up with a better guy.
I think, yeah. I mean, apparently it was a much different movie going into the Kurt Russell decision.
Right.
But because of scheduling, he couldn't do it. And so they got Jean-Claude Van Damme. And I think as a result of that, John Woo started adding a lot of these action scenes, which is weird because that's what he was known for.
Yes.
So it seemed it's strange that they'd be like, let's get John Woo, Kurt Russell, and not that much action. And like Jean-Claude Van Damme was the backup. I think they ended up with the right guy.
I agree. Especially when you look at Jean-Claude Van Damme's hair.
I mean, it's an amazing mullet.
It is. It's really good.
Greasy and super mullety.
So good.
I think this is Jean-Claude Van Damme at his absolute best.
I don't disagree. Hard to argue with that.
This is a situation where his accent actually kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
And usually in most of his movies, it's a Schwarzenegger situation where they just don't explain why this guy is speaking with his accent,
Yes. Yeah.
And I think he's actually pretty compelling as like a drifter dirtbag, which you don't often see with him.
Right.
And John Woo makes him look cool, which is kind of out of the ordinary for Jean-Claude Van Damme.
His entrance into this movie is phenomenal.
It's great. John Woo knows how to make people look cool, and like he has the skills to do it. It often involves birds. It usually involves guns.
Yeah, I mean, doves are a trademark of John Woo. You always see a dove fly out from somewhere.
There's a dove. There's lots of pigeons in this movie.
Yeah, I was going to say, the dove isn't the only bird that we get. We get a really interesting scene with Van Damme and a pigeon.
There's birds in Mission Impossible too, if you remember as well. But most of the characters get a really badass moment, including Lance Hendrickson getting lit on fire. And it's not a stuntman. He's on fire. It's actually him on fire. And of course, Jean-Claude Van Damme gets, in addition to the mullet, he gets mom jeans, which is great. He does. He has a really cool duster, too, at some point.
Yeah.
But his martial arts style often comes across as show karate.
A lot of flips. Through fire.
I don't think there's a split in this movie.
There's not.
And it's very gymnastics-y.
Yeah.
But not here. This is not a skills competition, which is like a lot of what his stuff is. It's fighting, it's action. And I kind of think that Jean-Claude Van Damme and John Woo are a perfect combination, and I wish they had worked together more often.
Yeah, it's a good pairing. It's a really good pairing.
Yeah, like Woo had, like there's something in Jean-Claude's like athleticism and like that distant foreign quality to his personality that John Woo can work with.
Yep.
But the action in this movie is incredible. The introduction scene that you mentioned, like it's a street fight and it fucking rules. It's a super violent fight, and the rest of this movie is very violent.
Extraordinarily.
I think that's the international cut. I believe they had to cut about 3 minutes out to get an R rating.
Really?
And so so the cut that we have, the international cut, you get a lot of blood. You get an arm broken in half, ears ripped off, teeth bashed out.
Yes.
It's awesome. It's great. And then the stunts are great practical stunts. You got people jumping through the air shooting guns, of course. Jean-Claude Van Damme riding a horse being chased by a helicopter. Great scene.
Great scene.
And then there's an amazing stunt, maybe one of my favorite of all time, with JCVD on the motorcycle where he's going to the truck and then the motorcycle bashes into the truck. The stuntman like jumps over, flips over the truck, lands on his feet. Lands on his feet.
Yeah.
And then the truck explodes.
Well, he pulls out a gun and he shoots.
He shoots the motorcycle. And that's only one of many of the spectacular explosions in this movie. But the bad guys in this movie are obviously they're bad guys, but they're not only bad dudes, but they're bad at what they do. They're bad at their business and they're bad at the game they're playing. Horrible business people. They have very poor customer relations. They treat their customers like employees all the time.
Yeah.
And they also kill their customers for no reason.
Yes.
But their human hunting operation is very shoddily run. Part of the operation is like some dude who gives flyers to homeless guys to hand out. And this guy's got like information on your hunting operation.
Right.
And like, by the way, if you get asked in a job interview if anyone in your life will notice if you go missing, that's a huge red flag.
Red flag. Yeah,
like,
steer clear.
And that's what happens. This guy's like, hey, just before I give you the job, one quick question. Would anybody miss you if like you disappear off the face of the earth?
Yeah, because just in case you get really fully committed to this job and you just fall off the grid.
And like, I mean, if you're running this kind of a business, it has to be airtight. Right. And they're not doing that.
No, they're literally hunting people in the streets of New Orleans, like on Bourbon Street.
Yeah, they're paying the cops off, yes, but like you still can't do that.
No.
The cops can't just be like, well, nothing happened here. You have thousands of witnesses.
Right.
But they also don't seem to have any interest in following the rules of this game.
No.
Like theoretically, they really don't have any outcome. Whether they don't have any interest in the outcome, whether or not the guy gets away from the hunters. But for some reason, they get pissed off when the guy is like, well, I don't want to shoot him. They should just be like, cool, that makes our job way easier. Nobody gets killed. But instead they're like, no, we have to make sure at least several people die here, including the guy that paid us for this. Like, that's not going to come back to haunt them somehow.
They're betting on themselves that nobody is going to survive. Because if somebody does survive, then all of this goes to shit. But yeah, it's a lot of questions here.
Yeah, but how do you need repeat customers? Or at least you need customers to tell other people, like, it was a great experience. I got to shoot a homeless man.
Yes.
You're not going to have those customers to bring in new customers if you kill them.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, horrible business plan. We don't know where it goes from here. But
Right.
But yeah, Hard Target is top level Van Damme. It's one of John Woo's, if not his best American movie. It has great practical action, tons of shit blowing up, and features a very dangerous, some would say the most dangerous game. So I'm putting it on the staff shelf for fun and games.
Very fun pick. Very fun pick. There's two things that I want to talk about before we move on. One is that you failed to mention that there is a scene in this movie where Van Damme punches a snake to death.
He does.
And then bites off its tail.
Yes.
It's badass. It also, Wilford Brimley, I think is remarkable in this role just for how weird he is. I
buy him.
I buy him
as a guy on the bayou or whatever.
Totally. Yeah, he's good. So it's very interesting that you chose this movie because I was considering bringing another human hunting movie to the table. The one that came out the following year, Surviving the Game, which
I wouldn't have been mad at that.
Yeah, I almost regret not bringing it to the table or the shelf, as it were.
Yes.
Because between the two, I prefer Surviving the Game only because the operation is more airtight and they've clearly worked through the risks and things like that. But there's also some great performances from like Gary Busey and whatnot from there.
I will say, this is much more of like it's better of a pure action movie.
Totally agree.
As far as like the hunting, the human hunting that's going on. Yeah, Surviving the Game is probably a better illustration of that. I will admit.
But what's great about this is you get Van Damme at his best.
Yes.
In spite of the fact that he doesn't give us a split, he's still phenomenal in this, and the action is great. Nobody does action quite like John Woo, even to this day.
I think the fact that he doesn't do the split makes it better. Because otherwise you're just like, oh, you're just like doing the tricks for us.
Yeah, right. I'm going to go to 2011 with my second choice, and that movie is Limitless.
Sweet.
Yeah. It'll be easy. Back of the box. A paranoia-fueled action thriller about an unsuccessful writer whose life is transformed by a top-secret smart drug that allows him to use 100% of his brain and become a perfect version of himself. His enhanced abilities soon attract shadowy forces that threaten his new life in this darkly comic and provocative film. A lot of adjectives thrown into the back of that box. Tagline here.
They probably could have cut the darkly comic part.
I think so. Yeah, for sure. Tagline, everything is possible when you open your mind. Bad tagline.
That's bad.
Yeah. The tagline should have been Adderall the movie.
They could have just gone with nothing like some of these other movies.
Yeah, that's fine. More movies need to adopt that approach.
Unless you have one that's awesome.
Right. Yeah, which happens.
Yeah.
What are people getting high on here? It's a fictional pharmaceutical called NZT. So I find this to be a movie that is just highly rewatchable. It's fast-paced, fun, immersive. This is a popcorn movie if there was one.
Yeah.
It features a take on getting high that's not your usual run-of-the-mill, light up a joint and get baked getting high. Limitless comes to us by way of Neil Berger. He did one of the Divergent movies. He also did The Illusionist, a couple episodes of Billions. We get Bradley Cooper here, Robert De Niro, and Abby Cornish. Cooper is great. De Niro collecting a paycheck. Cornish.
He deserves those paychecks.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not begrudging him that.
Yeah, I agree. I think Abby Cornish is kind of winning a participation award, but Bradley Cooper can.
There's a lot of participation in this movie.
There is, yes. Everybody's there.
Everybody's in the movie.
Yeah. Bradley Cooper, I think, can carry this all on his own. In 2011, he's kind of on the upswing. So he's like 2 years removed from The Hangover, 1 year removed from The A-Team. And then...
He wasn't quite Bradley Cooper yet, maybe?
Right. Yeah. And I think that Neil Berger found exactly the right actor at just the right point in his career for this part. Because, Bradley Cooper just has that charisma and he's at the right age. You can buy him as somebody before he's on his drug who's not doing a lot of things right. And then when he is on the drug and he's like the best version of himself, it's like, fucking totally buy it. Yeah.
You think the hard part for Bradley Cooper is being the loser at the beginning, but
right.
He's good at that.
He is good at that. Yeah. I'm glad that it worked out the way it did because Shia LaBeouf was originally cast in this part, but had to drop out because he was in a car accident. It was probably the beginning of the descent for Shia LaBeouf, which I'm not mad that, Shia was not the right guy for this. But like I said, I wasn't kidding when I said the tagline should be something like Adderall the movie. This feels like it was written by somebody who took Adderall for the first time.
I will also say it seems a little bit like it was written by someone who took Adderall for the first time and then it wore off towards the end.
Right. Yeah, I'll come back to that because I agree with you. Plot, super simple. Down on his luck guy discovers a miracle drug and becomes a perfect version of himself. Hijinks ensue.
Yeah.
I mean, it passes the elevator pitch test. Why did I choose it, though? What I love about this movie is that there's something so incredibly alluring about the high that is created by the drug in this film. It's not a euphoric high. It's an enlightened high. And, the absolute best version of yourself is just a fun thing to imagine.
Yeah.
And, when you see this happen to Bradley Cooper, you can't help but to wonder what the best version of your own self might be like. And it's helped by the fact that, the drug affects different characters in different ways in this movie. So, Yeah, the gears start to turn, and you're like, wow, what would I do?
That's an interesting question. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. But I also like that.
I mean, besides be a really good video store clerk.
Well, yeah, there's not a lot of room to improve.
Yeah. Well, there's room to improve. Not a ton of upward mobility.
Yeah, maybe that's a better way to describe it. But, I do like that the things that Bradley Cooper does when he begins taking this drug feel very believable. It's not like this guy realizes that he's suddenly a super genius and sets out to cure cancer or solve world hunger. He's like, I'm going to hook up with my neighbor. I'm going to clean my apartment. and it's, he's a selfish guy who just wants to succeed. And I'm glad that this movie didn't try to make him into something better than that.
But it also, I mean, he didn't know his potential at first. He doesn't, you don't. He also was like, you can only really take care of what's right in front of you as well.
Right. That's true. And, what he does at the beginning really only applies to that first time taking it. But even as he continues, and he gets to the point where he has a tremendous supply of this drug, he's still mostly just out to look after himself, which is fine. I think it makes for it's a smaller movie because of it, but
I don't want to see the movie where he's curing world hunger.
No, neither do I.
It's just like a lot of research and, paperwork.
100%. Yeah, so, this is one of those films that tries to dramatically change the experience of even watching the movie once, the high is being experienced by a character on screen. So, like, they turn the contrast way up and it gets, like, more way the fuck up. And
that shot where they're going down the street and it just keeps, like, repeating and you're going deeper and deeper and deeper. That's a really cool shot.
It is a cool shot. And it does a good job of showing you what is supposed to be happening to this character, which is, like, they are losing time and just kind of blacking out almost while they're on this drug.
That is what it's like being on these kinds of drugs. And actually, that's a little bit what it's like being on acid, so I've heard.
So, yeah, the rumor has it.
Yeah. That's what people at the store say.
Yeah.
Mostly customers.
Only. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. We hear it. But, I feel obligated to mention something that you touched on, which is there are some glaring plot holes in this film. Stuff that's pretty hard to turn a blind eye to. But I don't think this is trying to be a film with a bulletproof plot line. It just wants you to buckle up, enjoy the ride, and not ask too many questions about how you got from point A to point Z.
Yeah. The plot hole, I'm not bothered by the plot holes. And I mean, this movie is what it is. It's a 3-star actioner. I'm not bothered by the plot holes. What I wanted more, the thing is, like, the last half of this movie, it kind of turns into a little bit too rote of a thriller.
Yeah.
And there's not enough drug stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there needs to be like a point where he, like, comes across somebody who's, like, been doing it for 5 years and has this, there needs to be something, there needs more drug stuff in the second half. We need another scene or two where we see somebody else who's either mastered it or, something like that.
Could not agree more.
Some cool drug stuff.
Could not agree more. Now, some of the faults of this movie could be potentially explained by the fact that the writer here, a woman named Leslie Dixon, somehow managed to sell the screenplay under the condition that it would not receive any rewrites whatsoever by anyone else.
What?
Yeah, I don't know how
even herself.
I don't know how she managed to get that condition written into things, but this is essentially like her draft that got shot.
That is crazy.
It is crazy. But to your point, I think that there was some recognition that there's more to do with this world. There was a 2015 TV series based on this idea. That only ran for one season. Incidentally, Darren Aronofsky was a producer for it.
Oh, strange.
But I would watch more of this story. I'd love to see those interactions with people that have been on the drug for a while.
I don't know what the TV show's about, but I think it'd be cool to see the background of this drug, maybe some of the research, maybe, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Last thing I'll say, I don't know about you, but I really found myself wishing that this movie was rated R. It feels like it is handcuffed to the PG-13 bedposts, and I want to see more violence. I want to see more sex. I want to see all the things that happen unfiltered when a person is on this drug, and the consequences of having and using and possessing this drug. All of it feels like it begs to be rated R.
For sure.
Critical response essentially amounted to, this is a 3-star movie. And yeah, it is.
We agree.
3 gold stars, yeah. Ebert was just slightly lower with a 2.5 rating. His review was basically like, not terrifically good, but the premise is intriguing. Comes in at a 3.3 on Letterboxd. The user Griffin said, "Oh man, this is so silly. At least the premise is cool and it has a nice message. Drugs are tight and you should abuse the shit out of them."
I agree with the last part.
Yeah.
This is an aggressively premised movie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I think it does a great job of fulfilling the premise for the first, half to 2/3 of the movie, and it kind of forgets the premise at the last part. But otherwise, like if this is a premise, you're like, I want to see what that's like in a movie. You're going to see what that's like in a movie.
100%.
Okay, I'm taking this up to the year of 1991. This movie is called Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Directed by Ridley Scott.
No. Wasn't his just called Robin Hood?
Yeah, I'm just kidding. I watched the right movie this time.
I assume you've seen this dozens of times.
Oh my God, yeah. Who hasn't?
Yeah.
I mean, not only was it big at the time, but it was on TV every weekend for a decade.
Yeah, probably still is.
I'm sure it still is.
So this is the 1991 retelling of The Legend of Robin Hood starring Kevin Costner. Did you know this is not the only Robin Hood movie from 1991?
I did not know that.
There was an English production called Robin Hood. It starred Patrick Bergin, and Uma Thurman was Marion.
Shut the fuck up.
It was going to be released in theaters in the U.S., it ended up premiering on TV about a month before Prince of Thieves came out. And I don't know there were some business things and et cetera, et cetera. I assume the fact that a Kevin Costner Robin Hood movie was coming out, maybe that had something to do with it. But yeah, so there is another 1991 Robin Hood movie.
That's fascinating because I had thought that the last time that Robin Hood was featured in a feature film was like in the 70s in the Sean Connery film. That was, but
I think Robin Hood's just one of those things that every 6 months somebody makes a Robin Hood movie. I feel like there's been a couple that came out within the last couple years.
Oh, there have been, yeah.
They just
was in one. Yeah.
I think it's because it's in public domain.
Yeah.
And it's a decent story.
Yeah, it's fun.
Here's the back of the box. When the dastardly Sheriff of Nottingham murders Robin's father, the legendary archer vows vengeance. To accomplish his mission, Robin joins forces with a band of exiled villagers and comely maid Marion, and together they battle to end the evil sheriff's reign of terror. Tagline: sometimes the only way to uphold justice is to break the law.
My curiosity is piqued.
The movies of 1991 were movies that were like seminal in my movie-going experience. Here's some of the movies that came out, the top 10 grossing movies of 1991. Terminator 2, Robin Hood, JFK, Naked Gun 2.5, The Addams Family, and Hot Shots.
Wow.
All of those movies I watched over and over again, constantly.
Yes.
So this was a big year for me personally. I think for a lot of movie kids.
Wow. It's like 1999 was trying to do what 1992 did. Or 1991.
Yeah. And I don't even know what's below the top 10. I'm sure there's way more.
Who knows?
In Robin Hood, I love the world building of this movie. It's not particularly realistic, historically or otherwise, but it's fully realized. Everything's there. It all feels like one world. You got horses and swords and bows and arrows and castles and a supposedly haunted forest.
Yes.
And actually, when they're in Sherwood Forest, Robin and his his group, they actually engage in literal world building. They do like the Treehouse Village.
Oh yeah, like the Ewoks did. His merry men. You're referring to his merry men.
The merry men, yeah. Which they don't call them that in this,
right?
But we know
that's who they are.
But yeah, so like the costumes, the sets, the whole production, it just like gels into this cohesive vision.
Yes,
it's big, epic, classic storytelling.
Yes.
There's tons of characters, tons of locations, action, but it all flows together. And we even get explosions in the climactic action set piece at the end.
Who doesn't love explosions?
Which they technically they're like, okay, well, this guy's from the Middle East, and they knew how to make gunpowder there. Like, there's no reason to think that he would know how, or that they would have this stuff in the forest. But like, I appreciate the fact that they're like, we can get an explosion in this movie, right? But the editing is great. The sound design is outstanding.
The score,
I'm getting to that.
Okay.
But the action is always coherent.
Yeah.
Big giant action scenes, like several of them, like you always know what's going on. You always know who's fighting who. Mm-hmm. A lot of great practical stunt work. But yeah, the score, amazing.
Amazing. And it's the guy that did like the Highlander score.
Yeah, but he did Iron Giant.
Really?
He did Lethal Weapon, and he also did the score for Roadhouse.
Well,
so,
I'm not giving him enough credit by calling him the guy that did the Highlander score.
And I don't recall the Highlander score, but it's probably decent.
Not as good as this.
This is great.
This is really good.
And I'm not usually into power ballads. It's not my thing. But the Bryan Adams song has to be the best or one of the best of all time.
I mean, it's a good song. We've heard it a million times. I didn't
realize it, but it was actually not a Bryan Adams song. It's part of the score that they turned into a song. He wrote the words, and they just turned the love theme from this movie into a pop song.
Yep.
But they nailed it. They fucking nailed it.
Did.
And like, it's great in the movie. It's great as the song.
Yeah.
But what ultimately keeps bringing me back to this movie over and over and over again is the cast.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Kevin Costner's accent.
Well, it's hard to defend Kevin Costner's performance.
It's casual.
But I like it.
Yeah.
I don't mind it.
Fine.
Like, Costner wanted to do an accent. He wanted to do an English accent. The director, Kevin Reynolds, was like, please don't.
You can't do this,
and you can kind of see it straying in. I wonder if maybe they shot it both ways for every scene. That's just a guess, because there's some scenes where it's like, I think he's trying to do an accent here. And most of the movie, not at all.
Yeah, I don't know what order they shot it in, but I know that he had a dialect coach, and then the director was like, just go with what you have.
But I definitely don't want the version of this movie where he's doing an English accent.
No.
Like, I don't want that at all. I want Kevin Costner just being the way he is. I like when at the beginning when he says the line, "This is English courage," and he's just like he's totally saying it without an English accent.
Yeah.
But we get tons of great supporting performances: Morgan Freeman, Christian Slater, Michael Wincott, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, who has an insanely long name.
Yes.
Good for her. But this is my introduction to all these actors.
And I don't think it can be said enough. The supporting cast here is fucking phenomenal. Everybody is great.
Everybody's great. About halfway through, Michael McShane pops in as Friar Tuck, and he just starts like throwing in 99 mile per hour fastballs right down the middle.
Yes.
But there's no question, Alan Rickman absolutely steals the show.
Dude, he's so good.
He has the dial set at 11 for everything.
Yes.
Every scene, like, at no point is he not at 11. It's one of the most horse nuts performances I've ever seen. He's completely committed to this bit, completely unhinged, an absolute maniac. He's funny, he's scary, he's like perverted.
Oh, very. Yeah. And you have to wonder, and you might have an answer to this, how much of his dialogue came from him or was actually written on a page, because on paper, I can't imagine. Most of what he says feels completely out of touch with the rest of the movie.
Exactly.
But he fucking delivers it so well.
The story I'd always heard was that they were trying to get him for this movie, and he was like, I don't want to do it. And eventually the only reason he agreed to it was because he was allowed to do whatever he wanted with his character. And I have even heard that, like, he basically had some writers, or him and his whoever, did change a lot of the dialogue. And just kind of like, well, my character is more like this, you know?
Right.
Because, he does not fit with the rest of this movie.
No.
But somehow this lunatic performance is kind of validates the rest of the movie to me.
Yes.
Because it just kind of jumps off the screen and says like, this is a movie.
Yes.
And so you can allow some of like the dumb historical inaccuracies or the lack of an accent with Kevin Costner and all this other stuff. And kind of, there's a little bit of corniness to this, I guess, but like his performance allows all of that to exist, I think.
Yes. It's a permission slip for suspension of disbelief that you
For everything.
need.
Yeah.
100%.
It's one of my all-time favorite performances. It was like the first performance that like I was like, holy shit, like this is fucking wild.
It is. And, I have to say, I think that Michael Wincott playing opposite him really helps because Michael Wincott is a villainous guy in his own right and grounds Alan Rickman a little bit in spite of how up to 11 Rickman is. The two of them together are phenomenal.
So great together. I think Rickman, honestly, is like hilarious. Like it's not just like, it's crazy. Like it's hilarious. Like every scene. I'm laughing at him every single scene. It's incredible. This movie doesn't get a lot of love.
No.
It's what is it on Letterboxd? It's like a 3.1 on Letterboxd. Rotten Tomatoes critic score is 50. Audience is 72. So like it's one of those movies that like most people watch this movie and they're just like, it's corny and like I get it. And Kevin Costner is definitely not for everybody. I understand it. It doesn't bother me, though. I really dig this movie. Maybe nostalgia has something to do with it, but it's one of my all-time favorites.
It's funny because as our customers know, we have a great appreciation for a 3-star movie. And I think the rest of the world thinks this is a 3-star movie, but I think it's better than a 3-star movie.
Absolutely. To me, it's a 5-star. It's one of my favorites.
Okay.
It's got big, epic action. It's got a great forest. Great woods. We didn't even really have to get into that, but great woods. Alan Rickman, one of the most iconic performances of the 90s for sure. And we even get Sean Connery coming in to give us a cherry on top at the very end. So Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, definitely deserves a place on the shelf for In the Woods.
And if we're sold out of our copies, just throw on TNT and see. It might be on.
I don't know. I haven't watched cable TV in a while, but
no, you're right.
It's probably on TV.
Right. Well, fun pick. I'm with you in my appreciation for this. I grew up with it, and it's great. Well, I'm going to round things out with my final choice for this evening, and it is 1985's After Hours. This is a movie that I have walked past on the shelves for the better part of my life. I have seen the cover of this box countless times, had my curiosity piqued by it, but I've never actually gone through the motions and taken it to the register and brought it home with me. And I'm finally glad that I did.
Me too. I had never seen it either.
Yeah, for the longest time, I did not know that this was a Scorsese movie until I became more familiar with his filmography and saw this on his IMDb, but
one of the greats, but he's also one of those guys that's made so many movies that there's just huge sections of his filmography that I'm just like not acquainted with at all.
Agreed. We'll get to him, but let me dive into the back of the box. We've talked about the front. Here's what the back of the box says. Griffin Dunne is just a regular guy in that friendly, regular town, New York City, who winds up in a hysterical series of misadventures one long, crazy night while on the quintessential date from hell. Tagline here, when it's after midnight in New York City, you don't have to look for love, laughter, and trouble. They'll find you.
That's pretty true.
True. Again, not a tagline,
not
but
great.
Yeah.
That's like on a poster for New York.
Exactly. Yeah. As we said, Martin Scorsese directed After Hours. But if I hadn't known that, I wouldn't have guessed it from watching this. This does not feel like your typical Scorsese picture, and especially one that comes just after he's directed Raging Bull and King of Comedy, and just before The Color of Money and Last Temptation of Christ a few years later. He made this while Last Temptation of Christ was kind of in development hell. And so you can maybe even sense the notion of being in some version of hell in the story that's told here. This is mostly trying to be a comedy. It's pretty funny. It has a lot of satirical elements. But there's also something of a thriller and a little bit of a crime drama wrapped into this story of one crazy night in Soho. Cast is great. Griffin Dunn plays our main character. Rosanna Arquette is here. Linda Fiorentino, Catherine O'Hara, Will Patton, John Hurd, Cheech and Chong show up somehow.
It's a weird. It's got a weird tone. Not a weird tone, but it's an unfamiliar tone. So it takes a minute to be like, what am I watching here?
Yes. I would even normally I'd be tempted to dive deeper into the back of the box, give some context, but I think the joy of this film is being surprised by how our main character's night unfolds into this chaotic misadventure where try as he might, you can't escape this small neighborhood in New York. So I would say go in blind if you can.
We've talked a lot about some movies recently, like Uncut Gems being one of them, where it's like characters just like, what are you doing, man? Like, slow down. Just like make a good decision. This guy is just like, you can every step of the way. You're like, okay, yeah, he's just like kind of going with the flow. Like he's not like trying to make anything crazy happen. It's just like every step that he takes ends up in like a pile of shit.
Yes. So Scorsese is on record saying that, he was kind of inspired by some Greek mythology here, and this journey in a taxi cab into Soho for this date is supposed to be like, a trip into the underworld where, from that point on, things are just a nightmarish hell for this guy. And I get that. Interestingly, Scorsese did not know how to end this movie. So he consulted Spielberg, Brian De Palma, Terry Gilliam to get their advice on how to wrap this up. Apparently, the first cut was like 45 minutes longer. I'm glad that he cut it down.
Yeah.
I do think that it ends on a weird note.
It's anticlimactic.
A little bit. But, for me, there are parts of this movie that are somehow strangely relatable. Like, a date gone awry. I think a lot of us have experienced that. A series of unexpected events that turn a night sideways, finding yourself mixed up with some truly unusual people. All of it in one night, perhaps a little bit less common, but there are definitely themes here that feel familiar. I also think this is underrated Scorsese. It's for all the countless landmark dramas that he's done, like Raging Bull, Goodfellas, Departed, Mean Streets. After Hours is just different. It's fun, and it's also sophisticated. It's a joy to watch. It
is. It's a little bit of a hang.
Yeah, definitely.
You have to be on Griffin Dunn's vibe.
Yeah,
which takes a minute, but like once you're there, it's a hang movie.
Yeah,
but
you're rooting for him.
Yeah, I mean, bad shit's happening, but like you're rooting for him.
Right. This reminds me of a little bit of a Nicolas Cage movie from 1993 called Red Rock West. Where Cage can't escape a town that he's trapped in. I think this is a better movie, but it definitely took me to that as I was watching this. I was like, I feel like I've seen something like this before.
Yeah.
This is another movie that's similar to Born to Win from our last episode. Gives us a fascinating glimpse into a New York that is no longer there.
Yeah.
You get less of the city here. Everything takes place at night. But it's still a different town than the one we know today. There is a lot of this that feels dated compared to modern times. There would be a lot of easy ways for this character to get out of this neighborhood if he had access to an ATM or a cell phone or like an Uber app.
None of this would have happened, if you had a cell phone.
None of it.
Or, an ATM card.
Nothing, yeah.
There's so many movies like that. You're just like, literally this whole movie couldn't happen if the character had a cell phone.
Could not exist, yes. And this is one of them. So critical response was super positive for After Hours. It comes in a 4.0 on Letterboxd, earned 4 out of 4 stars from Ebert. I was glad to finally see it after avoiding it for too long. I did enjoy the review by Amaya that read, "Legend has it if you double feature this and Good Time, you develop a cocaine addiction on the spot."
Sweet.
Yeah.
For our last episode, I guess.
Right. Yeah. So I buy it. And for that reason, I am throwing After Hours on the shelf for our final all-in-a-day theme.
I have a take on this movie.
I'm so interested in hearing it.
This movie was made in, 1985?
Yes.
Somehow, Martin Scorsese was able to answer the question, what would Taxi Driver be like if it was an episode of Seinfeld? And that's exactly what this movie comes across as to me. And there's even a bit where he's doing where he's explaining how his night's gone up to that point, where he's standing in front of a brick wall doing a routine.
Yes.
And I'm like, this is stand-up comedy.
Yes.
And everything that happens to this guy is stuff that would happen in a Seinfeld episode, but it does have that New York taxi driver vibe of just bad shit around and stuff can just happen to you, you know?
Yep. I mean, for that reason, maybe it's not so unexpected that he made this after The King of Comedy, because it does. Yeah, you're spot on, I think, with that interpretation.
What is up?